Hi, I'm Pat,
And I'm JD, and this is the Live Like It's Your Business podcast.
the help desk for You Incorporated. So, dumb question. I didn't realize, but this actually the shirt has a logo on it. Should I
Does
try
what?
to crop that out of the frame?
Nah,
All right,
no,
we don't care.
and no, I don't care. Yeah, we're not. It's not like we're going to go to millions and millions of people, and then it's going to come after us for use of their logo before It's no, it's not that big of a deal. I don't think. Um, but going forward, though, I will say we always talk about your persona being your ego isn't a negative thing. Your ego is something that we create so we can interact and experience, the world. And me and Megan always say that it's not, as long as you're being authentic, you can still plan what face to put forward.
Right.
So feel free to dress up for our calls or dress down, whatever your persona is, that is the most organic, manifestation of your most authentic and best foot forward qualities, I guess. So
I like that.
for me, it's not even dressing up anymore. Now it's not having to dress up anymore, which means that I wear whatever the fuck I feel like it. And a lot of the times that's silly hats.
It's almost robe season.
Oh, bro, it's almost robe season. I'm about to bring out the robe and I'm really going to look like a fucking warlock. It's going to be fantastic.
Nice.
Okay. So
You know
here's
what? Honestly, like for some of this, I might like wear some of my like Ren Fair garb.
right. That's that robe.
We're going in like
2 weeks.
no, not this time we have the kids, but the next time we have them.
So in 4 weeks, we're going to Ren Fair. It's our Ren Fair here
Oh,
in
fuck
four
yeah.
weeks. So yeah, and we go as like a whole family dressed up. Like we get like I'm talking about. I'm wearing some eyeliner and face paint, and it's crazy fun. It's one of my favorites. Okay, so what I was thinking is, since we're essentially going to be planning the episode, we're thinking about 30 to 45 minutes between minimum and max. I would shoot for 42 minutes, but that's just because it's my favorite number. But that's also ideal for a podcast length if it's for audio. Traditionally, they're never really more than an hour unless it's like a Joe Rogan where it's almost an all-day event, but they also have like, these in-depth conversations with guests that we don't have yet. So I want to shoot for about 42 minutes. That's about the average time because that allows you space. If you end up adding sponsors, it gives you some space in the middle, the front, and the end, and then it usually comes out to about an hour. So I think of content itself, we need about 42 minutes of that. That's kind of the ideal sweet spot. That's usually what people have enough space in their day for. Typical travel from home to work is about 30 minutes or so. So again, 42 minutes is the proven business ideals for a podcast episode, at least towards the demographic in the market and kind of our content for that. We were thinking, like we had said before, it's like the Live Like It's Your Business podcast, and it's focused on, and I haven't figured out how to incorporate that tagline yet, but that you incorporated, like live like it's your business, life as you incorporated, or something like that. That way we're putting, the business brand in there, but also at the same time, which ultimately you're going to be the main host. At least as we were kind of discussing, and I don't know your thoughts on that, but I really do think you would make a better host by a long shot than I would be because I'm a talker.
Okay.
And hosts have balance, and that is part of my dharma still. So you as a host, a primary host, with the goal of, us starting out and letting it flow with eventually bringing on some guests. And then eventually I will kind of step back and be more like an occasional guest, whatever, but you're really spearheading it. And I'll be out there trying to market this show, other shows, but also trying to, as I network, bring in this list of who I have on my end from that spiritual, scientific, and business spaces mixed with all your network connections in that business and those spaces, and we can kind of bring them together and kind of make this your flagship is what we were thinking. So
Sounds good.
Another more long-term we were thinking would be great for this is once we get the platform, that we're developing done, we start integrating that into this podcast. And then all of the guests and stuff that we bring on can then contribute to courses or whatever they want on the platform to help people learn how to live like it's their business. And then that lets our networking and stuff really take those areas of influence and those areas of expertise. And since we're already networking and building a relationship with them, having them contribute at least something small of what they know or do into a course format, whether it's free or they charge, either way, they would be getting exposure, but more importantly, they'd be actually providing something of value that will help other people, which is, really what this is all about. So that was my original thoughts on it. And obviously I know Megan was in similar line of thinking as me on that as well. So from here planning, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? And what do you want to talk about? Yeah.
Are we talking like content, like goals, like just you want me to just riff on like what my general thoughts are?
Yeah. The way I looked at it from a general concept to knowing what this show is, it is about personal, professional, business, and spiritual development, right? It will always be in one of those four categories, but the goal is to really, it's that psycho-spiritualist of duality to unity through understanding. It's taking these things that say we're talking about a personal thing that me and you have had, or that we went through that day. And then we talk, our traditional calls, we also talk about our business. And then it's looking for that unified message, that lesson that was provided to us through spirit, through universe, through psychology, through whatever you want to lens you want to call it. There is a united message or lesson in those experiences. So I was thinking, like, we just do what we always do. We talk about, with some personal stuff that you're dealing with, some problems, and in your life, in personal, professional, business, or spiritual. And then let's tie it together and come up with solutions for whatever those are. And really the focus on taking the same things that we learn and practice in our business, because me and you, that's huge for us. We're business. What tools and resources did we use to solve problems, to automate, to create value in our businesses? And how can those same concepts and resources also be applied in some way, shape, or form to what problems we're having in our personal life? So we can thus treat ourselves, live like it's our business, like let's treat our life like a business. And how do we do that? So that's what I was thinking of, a general concept.
I like that. I like that as a general concept. I like the idea of taking real world scenarios and bringing them into a lesson or some kind of guide for the average person, to where they might not be able to relate to the specific instance, but if we can take that the core of whatever event that was and make it a lesson that is applicable to the day-to-day lives of basically every English speaking person out there. The only reason that I limit that is because obviously until we can translate this into multiple languages, we're stuck in it.
Let's start with what we know and then elaborate and expand, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, and like I have a couple scenarios of just today. Like I woke up and had a flat tire, and not only that, but like right after I found the flat tire, I got a text message from my opening bartender showing me that somebody had almost ripped the door handle off of the bar last night. And I'm like, so here's the thing. A year ago, 2 years ago, that would have been upsetting to me. Like I would have had a very negative emotional reaction to that. And I would have been like, now I gotta spend money. I gotta, get a handyman. I gotta whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm like, this morning, I was just like, wow, that's pretty funny. And then so in my head, anyway, I got a couple of these, and I'm going to be a little scatterbrained about this. So after I told my team, because they were like, we got to see the security footage of who thought they could like just open a deadbolted door with the handle. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. I'll get there, but I have a flat tire. I got to deal with that. And then literally 3 people on my team were like, oh my God, I have a flat tire this morning. I was just like, okay, so that's a perfect example of Mercury and Uranus or something like that. I don't know, but it was one of those things where I was just like, those confluences, right? It's not a coincidence, just a confluence of experience within our human experience that we're having, on this plane of existence. Like that's just, wow, that's kind of cool. Sucks that we all have flat tires, but I mean, that's still kind of cool. Like that happened. It's like, Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect word for it.
Synchronistic.
And so like I didn't have any kind of like really negative reaction to it. And same with the door. Like a year ago, I would have had a much different reaction to that. I would have been like, man, now I gotta, my day's ruined and all this other crap. Like I would have had a unproductive response.
Right.
But this morning I looked at the flat tire and I was like, the tire shop's only like a half mile away. Could I make it in the tire's current state? No. Okay. I have a fix-a-flat somewhere, like a can. I got to find that. So I went and found it. But when I found it, it was like this little package thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's called Slime or something. But it has the fix-a-flat like can in it. But it also has a cigarette lighter operated pump, like a compressor. And I was like, I can just use that to fill the tire up enough to drive down to the tire shop, you know? And so I get to the tire shop, I, get the car in. I'm like, hey, I need a couple of tires. And you know what? While I'm here, I need an oil change. Oh, and just because we're doing everything anyway, there's a headlight out. And oh, you know what? When the car gets going like above a certain number of miles per hour, there's a really bad shake. You check that out too. And the guy was like, yeah. And at the end of that, he was like, you know what? We don't have those tires in stock. We're going to order them. They should be here today, but we don't know. And I'm like, well, that's a problem. That's definitely a problem. But me reacting emotionally to that doesn't make it better. It doesn't enhance my experience. It doesn't enhance my life. And I have that choice. Like that emotional reaction is a choice. And that's one of the things that I want to get out there is that, like, guys, ladies and gentlemen, your emotions, your reactions are a choice.
Ooh.
You can choose. You
There's
can
some
choose.
dirty words you're putting out there. Some dirty words. Some people are going to say there's some dirty words. Trust me. That's, oh my God, the amount of, and here's where I've come with that is that, and I agree 100%. We had a very similar situation. It was Megan's birthday and we woke up and the car battery was dead. And normally it would turn into a whole ordeal. And this time it did. It turned into a whole ordeal, but like a pretty fun, exciting one. First thing I did is like, well, I needed to go to the grocery store, and where we live at, there's one that's maybe 2 blocks away. And I was like, it's really nice out. It's been really hot, but today it's really pretty out. I'm going to walk. So I walked and I was like, I needed the exercise. It felt nice. I don't get out of the house much because of all the work. And then on the way back, I was like, I just synchronistic walked past one of those little scooters, the little Lime scooters or whatever they were, the ones you can rent. And I was like, perfect. Yeah. So I scanned my card on that, jumped on it, and got to just ride a scooter back with a little bag of whatever we got for lunch. And I was like, what an experience, what an opportunity that was, because it was an opportunity, and that opportunity always existed as an option. But so does the opportunity to respond like, well, of course my fucking battery doesn't work. Of course it's Mercury, fuck Mercury retrograde, fuck, like just I had an opportunity to respond, and free will being what it is, I got to choose how I wanted to respond. And something, and I don't even remember where I read it, but it's right on line with that, is it's easy. Megan always says, my favorite parable ever was one Megan came up with, is that a chicken shouldn't judge an egg based on its ability to be a chicken sandwich, right? Because the chicken was once an egg, so it needs to have some space and grace, because it needs to have compassion because it's been there and it knows what that was like. Also, the egg is perfect in what it's supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a chicken yet because it's still an egg. So it's doing nothing wrong. And at the end of the day, neither of them have reached completion, which is the joke, to become a chicken sandwich. Like none of them have gotten all the way there to judge anybody. And it just really gives you this, it gives you this perspective. And the reason why I'm saying that and how that connects to what you were just saying is, my biggest frustration in what I do, and especially in the spiritual space and my like consulting coaching stuff that I do, is I get really frustrated when I have the right answer and I'm trying to tell somebody the right answer. And then because they're suffering for whatever reason, right? Suffering is we can define suffering as when our perception of reality doesn't align with our personal preferences and expectations, right? So if we are out of alignment, that breeds suffering, perceived suffering. And so when I see somebody suffering, I know that suffering as a diagnosis is essentially you're out of alignment, right? So you're suffering, that is not a sickness, that's a side effect of being out of alignment. So I see that and I'm like, okay, I look at the person, I have a quick conversation, and I'm like, why? I can discern what's out of alignment with their logical thinking. But the problem becomes is once you get there, and I was just doing a call with Laura Starr's astral projection, and we talked about something similar in this context. Is some people don't want to not suffer. Do you know what I mean? Like that sounds absurd. And I remember early on in me and Megan's relationship, she was having a really tough moment on something. And I was like, yeah, well, you want to suffer. And she's like, excuse the fuck out of me. Like, what do you mean I want to? I'm saying that it's a choice, that you don't have to suffer if you just don't want to.
So right there, what you're talking about, that's a key part of, it's not necessarily like a want in the terms of like, I want chocolate cake. It's not that type of want. What it is, and you can riff on this in a second, but it's like it's part of your identity. It's part of who you identify as.
100%.
And so like you're saying that you're the identity that you want to
that persona
put forth is the hat. Well, it's just another hat. Like if you want to play a victim, if you want to be a victim, then you're going to wear the victim hat all day, and you're going to find ways to be a victim. It doesn't have to be that way. And that goes back to behavior. Like you are responsible 100% for your behavior. Agreed. The thing that people don't realize is that both thoughts and emotions are behaviors.
Yes. Routine.
And so, yes, habits and behaviors. And I'm not saying that it's not, or it's bad, or, you shouldn't have knee-jerk reactions to things. It's controlling what happens when that happens that's important. Right. Like, stub your toe, do you punch a wall, or do you scream, or like the thing has happened, the thing is reality. How you respond to that reality is going to determine your next reality. Right.
And that comes down to perception. Yeah. Yeah. And it's what you were saying is, this going back to persona, which is, we'll call it I call a persona is just a conscious manifestation of ego, right? An ego is something that is running you. A persona is when you and that ego work in harmony to create your best foot forward, so you can then create, something positive. But that persona and where ego differentiate, it's all about what you said, identity. Right? What separates an ego from a persona is, do you identify with it? Right. And it goes back with that bouncing back and forth between unity and duality. But when you realize that within your mind, there is at least you and something else, right? Once you create that division, that's where people are like, oh, I am not ... this feeling. I am not this experience. I am not these thoughts. These thoughts are clouds. I'm the sky, and I am the observer who's watching them pass by. Right? Yeah. So then you create that duality. And for most, and why I even told that chicken story is I would get so frustrated because I could tell somebody this, but they just couldn't fucking hear me. It's like they literally couldn't hear what I was saying to them, no matter what I said, no matter how I put it. And I would get frustrated, and I would go to that current understanding or that interpretation of what you said, where people want that word want is not the best descriptor of wanting to feel suffering, but it's for most part, it's comfortable for a lot of us to sit in suffering. A lot of us have been victims in whatever way most of our lives. We're pre-programmed to believe that. And so when we believe that, we identify for it. So to me, your belief is the linchpin that holds that that victim mentality hat into place, you know,
Yes.
belief, right? And when you realize what is belief, it's not a physical thing. It is, like you said, a routine, right? It's a pattern. It's a process that you have. So when you just separate and say, I am not these things, I am the observer of these things, then you realize what you're doing is not, you're not supposed to feel them in their entirety unless you choose to consciously, you know, like to participate. But if you just start labeling them and not judging them, not being any kind of positive or negative, label them as what they are, then your brain goes into this logical state, and it's managing your emotions, because you can't have emotions and logic working at the exact same time in a conflicting state. So that is literally, like, I think the crutch of it. And I think that's what's great about doing a Live Like It's Your Business podcast, is because one of the fundamental things of a successful business is having a repeatable process, right? And understanding the stages of that. And then how do you use those things to work in your favor and not against you? And that is exactly what we're doing here with this emotions. It's the emotional, like an
Right. Yeah.
emotional business plan almost, you know?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And to go along with that, to take that metaphor just a little bit further, one of the things that businesses have to have, and a lot of them don't, and it really shows when there's big problems, is you have to have either like an emergency response plan, a disaster recovery
Right.
plan. You have to have a way to respond to incidences and emergencies, and you have to have
Right.
that thought out, understood, practiced. You have to
Yeah.
know, like, if this happens, do this. Once you have that for your personal life, for like
Right.
day-to-day things, then even big catastrophes become so much more manageable,
They become
because you're like,
routine.
so okay, I got in a car accident. Obviously, that's going to be a traumatic event. It's going to be high energy, a lot of anxiety, fear, adrenaline, but if you have that practiced thing of, am I physically okay? Am
Right.
I, do I need anything like immediately, like, right? Do I need medical attention? That's the
Right.
first thing. Are you physically okay?
Right.
And then move forward from there in steps, and just have that knowledge. And, I'm not saying you have to write a standard operating procedure for everything in your daily life, but what I am saying is know what you're going to do when shit happens.
Right.
If you own a home, a pipe breaks, know where your stuff is around the home. Oh God, pipe broke. Now I'm not looking for the
Right.
emergency shut off. I know where it is. I go and
Which
shut it
sounds like
off.
common sense, but it
But people
sometimes some
don't do
things are
this.
so common sense that we just were like, oh, well, I'll know what to do. Dot, dot, dot.
Exactly.
And you might, but even going what you say, like, you don't need this whole elaborate thing. When you look at what is a system in its most fundamental form, a system is input, process, output. That's it. That's it.
Mhm.
In the state
Yeah.
of your subconscious routines and your emotional intelligence and your what we call, like, your consciousness operating system. How
Mhm.
that works is, input is, say, a trigger, an event, an occurrence, something that occurs. And then your process is, how do you handle it? And then your output is, what result do you want to have when it's complete? Right now, the
Mhm.
problem that most people get is, first of all, having awareness that there's even a process, that
Right.
there is something that is occurring without your conscious participation, because that's what we call unconscious behaviors, right?
Mhm.
But without you being conscious, this is still happening. And your subconscious, your ego, we'll call it an ego because it's steering the ship when it's the one running these routines and you're not consciously doing them. It's not against you. It's not bad. It's not trying to hurt you. It's doing the opposite, right? It is looking at input. It is going through its processes and routines that it's established over your entire life to manage similar inputs. And then it's giving an output, which for its bare objective is, are you alive and are you safe? Right? That's
Yes.
all. Are you safe? So if you look at your business as a body that you incorporated here, and you're like, what are my processes? Well, when something comes in, what do I do with it? And what do I want out of it? If you start
Mhm.
with making that 3-step process, your operating system for the bare necessities, then that becomes your process, right? Your process is when XYZ occur, when anything happens, my first step is, what is the input? What do I want the process to be? And then what is my end result that I want? And then respond, which full circle, going back to what you said before, and something I'm experiencing myself as well, is I'm so used to reacting instead of responding, right? Because my ego is trying to keep me safe from perceived danger. I allow it to take the steering wheel, and then I don't know what that is. But I've learned it's so hard to change the triggers, right? You can't always change the triggers, but the processes are easy, right? To change, because you can change. What is that old saying? Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional, right?
Yes.
Pain can be a trigger, and you can't always control pain, but you can control your process. So stop trying to change the things that trigger you, because there will always be something. But instead, how do you handle what you're given? And if you first consciously name it, label it, what is occurring, and then let's skip the processing. Let's go straight to, what do I want out of it, right? Like, if this happened, cool. What do I want? I want to be happy. Cool. Let's build a process backwards to that trigger. And then next time this occurs, then I know that when this happens, this reward happens, and I get there from XYZ. So it's like it's a fundamental operating system for what do we say, Megan? Human beings. It's a human and a being. And to get them to work together, you have to have a consciousness that is awareness. And then you have to have your ego / persona, and you guys have to actually work together, instead of, this one steering the ship saying you're trying to kill us, and this one over here saying, this one doesn't say that the ego is bad, but this one will say, hey, look, I'm not the subconscious, you're bad. And then, whatever. But if you know that you're a being, and you've posted a lot about this the last few days, and it's really been hitting my feet a lot, and I'm grateful for it, you're giving off some hardcore Eckhart Tolle vibes with the power of presence. That as long as you go back to that, what you're saying, that presence, that observer, and you can observe and not disassociate, disidentify, with what's happening, you start to label it. Then you get to what I think is really a purpose for a lot of us, is getting to that conscious creator level. Like, you have unconscious, and then you have, your people who are the observers that are balanced and zen. But then you have people like us who, like, what happens when we get in balance? Can we then do something? And then, that's the conscious creator. And I've rambled. I apologize.
No, I'm realizing that if I'm going to be the host of this, I'm going to step outside of the flow real quick. If I'm going to be the host of this, then I shouldn't be interrupting the people that I'm interviewing in order to interject a thought that I have. What I should do is take a note of the thought, wait for them to finish, and then circle back to what I had originally wanted to say, and do it that way, so that I'm not interrupting their flow. Smart. So that's what I just did. I'm not saying that you were rambling at all. That was not the point of that.
No, but I just took a lesson from that, because that's a good idea, especially when you're having conversations and going to the topic at hand, right? You just took a professional, in that professional development, and you realized effective communication means active listening, but I don't want to remember my thought. I'm going to write down a note and then revisit. What a great resource that you applied to your, to a spiritual conversation.
Right. Absolutely.
Worked.
And so I'm going to use that right now and go back to, remember that you were talking about the processes, how you have that process, right? And this is an individual thing too. It's not just business. It's not just, big things. It can be little things, but one of the important things that everybody needs to do, personal, business, whatever, is review past experiences. Not just be present enough to see triggers and understand them. And, even to get to that part of seeing a trigger and understanding that you have a process, and your next step in that process can be changed. The trigger is hard to change.
Yes.
But the next step in the process, that you can change. And it is eminently doable. And I wouldn't say that it's easy, but it's definitely possible. And especially if you have that reflection, that review process built into your self-awareness, you need to be able to ask yourself this question of, why did this scenario play out the way it did, what was my responsibility in that? What did I do to get
Right.
there? And, you know, then you got to ask yourself all the whys, like, well, why did I do that? Why did I
Right.
have that reaction? Why was this my response? Where did I even pick this up? Like I told you the story about me walking by the bus stop, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so this was back way when I started my it was at the time a personal development journey, which has evolved into my psycho spiritualist journey,
Yeah.
and my spiritual kind of awakening and my redefinition of me. But back then, it was 2019. I was determined to get in shape. It was the beginning of the year, so it was, you know, always kind of a little gloomy, rainy
Yeah.
outside, and I mean, it's San Diego. I live in San Diego, so I mean, it's not like rainy, but it's, you
Yeah.
know, a little overcast, a little colder. But I decided I was going to get to work a couple hours early every day and walk a 5K around my building, in the general area, not literally in circles around the building, but around the area. And I would listen to podcasts or audiobooks or whatever. It's when I got really into Gary Vee and
Yeah.
Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins. Like I got really into all those guys, listening to their stuff. And I don't remember what I was actually listening to at the time, but every morning on my route, because I did kind of the same route, there was this bus stop right out in front of a Bank of America building, and it had every morning just this giant brackish black muddy water puddle in the gutter, uh, for about 20 feet in front of this building. Like the gutter is just filled, and it's at a bus stop. And so this particular morning, I was walking by that bus stop, and I had this mind movie that played. And that movie was, you know, this big truck or a bus is going to go flying by, hit the puddle, and just spray me with this disgusting, freezing, nasty water. And that movie was playing in my head as I walked by the bus stop. And when I got to the corner, which was like maybe 50 feet away, like my heart rate was elevated. I had my fist clenched, my jaw was clenched. There was some random dude
You
standing at the
believed it.
corner. And yeah, like I had fully and completely committed to this anger reaction, and nothing happened. And I got to the bus stop, and I was ready to, like, if that guy looked at me wrong, I was ready to swing on him. I was like, come on, say something, push me, get in a fight. I want to damage something right now. And I'm full on just ready to hurt someone. And I
Right.
stopped and I looked around and I went, why am I so pissed off? Literally nothing happened.
Right.
I'm on a walk, like I'm listening to a thing that I want to listen to. I'm out, the weather's relatively good. I'm on my way to go get coffee because that was my route. Like I would go
Yeah.
Starbucks, get my coffee, and then continue my walk. And I'm like, nothing bad happened. Like literally nothing bad happened. And yet I am in this absolutely
Toxic.
ridiculously toxic, angry, just ready to hurt someone frame of mental and emotional state right now. And that was such an absolute mind blowing realization to me that the anger just went away.
Yeah.
First off, I was like, I went into kind of like a shock mode, and then I realized that the audio is still playing, and I had absolutely no idea what it was saying. So I paused the book, and I put on some other music, and I just kept walking, ignoring the music for the most part, but just replaying that in my head, going, why did I do that? Why am I so good at that? I am really good at pissing myself off for no reason.
Right.
Like I am really good at it. Like that took 20 seconds less for me to go from, you know, out enjoying a morning
And
walk
no
to
effort.
ready to fight somebody with
And
zero effort. I
no
was
effort.
really, really good at it. Really good at it. And then I started asking myself all the questions like, why am I so good at it? Why don't I do this with positive emotions? Why am I not walking down the street and suddenly feel like elated, joy, happiness, contentment?
Right.
Why is it a negative emotion? And then I go, how often do I do this?
And don't even
And
know it.
it's like, I and so I was like, okay, I'm going to run an experiment today while I'm at work. And every single time I catch myself going down an anger rabbit hole or a negative emotion, I'm just going to put like a tally mark on this little
Right.
notepad that I have next to my desk. And I must have done that, like, it was probably closer to 10, but I want to say like 20 times. Like
Wow.
I had a bunch of like tally marks on that page. And at the end of the day, I was staring at it like, this is literally why I'm miserable. this is why I'm miserable. I mean, the environment I'm in is not great. The job wasn't amazing, but these tally marks on this page representing all the times that I made up a story to myself, played myself the movie,
Right.
and then reacted to it for nothing.
Right. And they
And
say, well, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but kind of just to what you're saying about that is going back to that ego, that subconscious that is steering. People don't realize not only is it a child, it's your inner child that's driving, but it's also like it doesn't have any senses, right? Like senses are tied to your conscious awareness, that eyesight, hearing, senses. Your subconscious, your ego, only knows the reality through emotions and beliefs. What you tell it is happening is literally how it makes its decisions. And so we always say, like, the past isn't real and the future isn't real, right? The past is at its most real. It is our memories. It's a non-physical thing that we can't touch or change, right? And our future is at its most physical. The future is our imagination of what could happen, right? Neither of these things are real. The only thing that's real is the current physical moment that you're in, quote unquote physical. But when you are in that moment, we always say, we like to joke about time travel. Like when we're having some kind of negative response, it's because we're time traveling and we're either fucking up the timeline in the past or we're fucking up timeline in the future, right? Because your subconscious doesn't know the difference between this moment and any other moment. So when you are having this visual and emotional experience in your head of this is going to happen, and then you experience it in your head as happening, whether it happens or not, your subconscious has no idea. It just knows this is what's happening. Don't worry, Pat. I got you covered. We've been through this before. My job is to protect you. We're going to get even more alert, and we're going to be aggressive about it, and we're going to protect. Me and Megan say, keep the castles, because we play a lot of chess. Like, keep the castles, guards up, everybody get ready. We're going to defend this fucking castle. Right. But it doesn't know that it's not actually happening. Right. Because we told it was, and why would it think any different? So that awareness, man, like that is the hard part, I think. Right. That awareness.
That first step, being self-aware enough to see that it's happening, is something
Right.
that I think a lot of people, well, even just illuminating that, just showing people that they can have that self-awareness to be able to make changes. Like, if you're not that self-aware, you're not going to be able to make those changes. That's like step number one, figure out yourself. But there's a couple of things I wanted to touch on real quick, directly related to that and one of those things is that this is a somatic response. This is psychosomatic. It's spiritual somatic, really.
Yeah.
And what it is it's your body actually has biochemical and physical changes that it undergoes when it experiences an emotion. Now, here's the weird thing, is that your body can't differentiate between the memory of an emotion or one that's happening in real time. So either way, this is one of the reasons why triggers are such a huge thing, is because you are actually reliving that emotion by playing that memory or by pulling that up. Like, your body can't tell the difference. Your subconscious can't tell the difference. It is you're literally reliving it in very, very many, like, measurable and provable ways. You are reliving that emotion.
Yeah, and the subconscious doesn't know the difference.
Exactly. And so the other thing that I was going to mention on that is that this is one of the reasons that it made me hyper conscious of the words that I use, because words, regardless of what language you speak, the universe does not speak your language. The universe speaks in energies and
vibrations.
Some people would say math, but yeah, it's
Megan says math.
So that's what I'm saying. But like, it's the universe communicates in energy and frequencies. We as humans use words to focus energies on certain frequencies. That's the point of language, is to communicate at a frequency that everybody knows and can relate to. So when I realized that words are literally energy focus mechanisms, they're tools to focus energy, I got really, really careful about the words I use in my own head when I'm talking to myself and when I'm talking to others. And that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't realize. And that's why, real quick example, like I stopped using the word or the forms of the word depression unless I'm talking about it in a clinical sense. I no longer tell myself I'm depressed. I don't tell myself that I have depression. I tell myself that I'm sad or I'm feeling melancholy or something like that. And the big reason is because the energy behind sad and melancholy, that's normal. It's temporary. It is a current state. And using those words to
An
describe a current
observation.
state is okay. It's an observation. It's looking at it from the
Right.
outside. Depression is an identity. It's a
I am
diagnosis.
depression.
It's
I am depressed. Yeah.
exactly. It's much more of it's a permanent condition. And you are, when you use words like that to describe yourself, you are describing and reinforcing that permanent condition within you.
That
Now,
identity.
I'm not saying that please understand if this makes it into a Final Cut anywhere. I'm not saying that depression isn't real, nor am I saying that, some people don't need medications and, other things. I'm
Right.
strictly saying that the use of those words energetically reinforces
An
whatever that
identity.
is.
And
Yeah.
I will go ahead and say, with that, I am right 100% in alignment with that belief. I use the term I was diagnosed. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder a long time ago. And anybody who knows about borderline personality disorder, it's an extremely turbulent thing that a lot of people wouldn't even believe that I have. Or I have been diagnosed with, right? I have been provided. But kind of to tie that up, because I know we're getting close to our 45-minute hour mark here, but to kind of wrap up what you're saying about that is, yes, that subconscious is there to protect you, but it needs to know what you is, right? And what is it protecting?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And that's where that identity comes in, not over a persona. Your identity, your subconscious is like, oh, I am this. But when you identify with something like that, say like I am borderline personality disorder, then my subconscious adds that to my identity map as something to protect, right?
Yeah,
If
and it will
same
defend
with
it.
Yeah, and like victim, like if I shout at the top of my lungs that somebody did something to me, I am actually saying I am a victim, and my subconscious is like, check, got it. We're victims. We're going to defend that. If anybody says that I'm not a victim, then fuck you. It's on. And then guess what? Shields up, swords out. We will defend the castle. We will keep the castles. And in behind this wall is this victim mentality, because I've said it so often that I believe it. And it comes to belief. But again, I'm not saying that there is no victims or of things. I'm just saying that the labels and the words that we use, like you said, are so important when we are telling our subconscious what to protect, right? And that comes with that consciousness. Yeah, absolutely. I believe it.
And that, going further from that, being conscious of this is one of the ways that you can heal from trauma. I'm not saying, and I know you're not either, that there are no victims. There are definitely victims. People have been victimized. People are attacked. People are harmed. People are hurt. That is real. And we are not trying to diminish that in any way, shape, or form.
And pain is inevitable, right? It happens.
Right. But healing from that trauma is what we're talking about. Getting
100%.
past whatever happened to you, getting past that and moving on to where you can be okay again.
Yeah,
that
100%.
is what's important.
And it's,
that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, you can't control what happens to you, but what you can control is what you do with what you're given. And the last thing I'll add before, and I'll let you wrap it all up, but the last thing I want to add is this is a very important parable, but it actually did happen to us. But and this goes to explaining things in a way that people can understand. We have this friend who lives in India, and when I first met him on Facebook, he had gotten stung by a bee, and he had this picture of his hand up like this, and you see the giant red bump, and he has just this biggest, happiest grin on his face. He's like so happy about it, right? And under it, he wrote that essentially, when a bee stings somebody, it loses its stinger, right? That it dies. And he said, and while that hurt, and I'm going to elaborate, he didn't say all of this, but I want to really get how I felt about it and what he was kind of saying, though, that, we can't help but be stung. It happened, right? Something we may have been made to be in a moment a victim of something that we feel we did not choose nor want, right? And you can't take that away because it happened. But he sat with it in fucking gratitude. Like literal, he said this grin, he said, I realized in that moment that this bee stung me, and then shortly it would be no more. There would be no more of that bee. Its last dying moment, and this gives me chills, man, because it's true. He said in its dying moment, it chose to share that with me. Like of anywhere in the entire infinite universe that it could be, this bee gave its life for a moment with me. And I got to sit there and be like, thank you. Thank you for sharing a moment with me. It didn't align with his expectations, his preferences or expectations. Nobody wants to be made a victim, but in that moment, he had a choice to make. Do I accept it in 100% entirety, or do I change it to something that I can? And if you have been given pain, you can accept it in its entirety, or you can change it to something that you want it to be. And sometimes that's as simple as changing the labels that we give these situations. So to what I think that you're saying, and how I interpret that, is that yes, all of us have been made to be a victim of circumstance in some capacity within our life, but it is up to us, and it is our individual and personal responsibility to own not only the labels that we give it. I don't mind if you're still saying this happened to me, because that's an objective observation, but what are you going to do with it? Like, what does he say, Megan? He goes, what kind of bee sting do you want? You know, like you can sit there and suffer with it, or yeah, we tell our kids that, like, what kind of bee sting do you want? Right. So if this happens to you, sit with it. I would say fucking lean in, right? Lean in like you fucking asked for it, because maybe you did and you just didn't know it. Lean into it, feel it, learn from it, and then move forward and do something great.
I'm going to tie this in with the words that we use and how they have meaning, and how a simple change in vocabulary can literally change your life. And one of the words that I don't like to use anymore is the word can't. And the reason is that can't is an end. It's a stop. It's a hard,
a divide,
absolute that you can't move past. It's an ending. That's it. But simply reframing that, and instead of making it a hard statement, ask a question. How can I? What will it take? What do I need? What do you need? What do we need? What's another way? Is there another route? Is there something else we can do? Start thinking creatively. When you ask those questions, instead of just saying, I can't as a stop. The second that you remove that stop, you have possibilities, absolute, almost limitless possibilities. And you can start to think creatively. You can get your subconscious on board with maybe you can. And so instead of making statements that are final, I like to ask questions that are open. How can we help you? What can you learn from us? What can we learn from you? Where would you like to see this go? What would be most beneficial to you? And what questions do you have?